Well, good morning, Vivid Church. How you doing today? You're looking good, 8:30. It's going to be a good morning for those that I haven't gotten the chance to meet. I just want to introduce myself. My name's Kendrick, and I serve as the pastor here at Vivid. You joined us at the perfect time. We are concluding a series that we call Love Handles, and we are in part 4 of it today. And 2 days ago, we had our very first, what we called Married People Date Night. Was anybody there that went to date night? It was so fun. It was amazing. And we put another love handle in there, and it was all about getting a handle on laughter. So we laughed a ton, and I just thought, it would be kind of fun to give you just a taste of what you missed if you weren't there, And so I'm just going to tell you one of the things, not all the things, but just one of the things. And it's so funny when we talk about laughter and humor. It makes things so much easier. And when I was in Visalia, there was this story. I had to periodically meet with different people in the church. And there was this lady named Betty, and she was in her 80s. And I met with Betty one month, and I said, Miss Betty, just tell me, what's something unusual or funny that's happened to you, here in the last, since we last met or so? Just tell me something. And she said, oh, honey, just yesterday, I could tell you a story right now after I walked out of my mammogram appointment. And I said, this has got to be good. I mean, this is what every pastor wants to hear right here. You know what I'm saying? We got a 80-something-year-old lady. Here we go. And I just said, well, Betty, what would that be? That you have a story from just yesterday. And she said, well, I go in to get the exam, right? And in the room where they do it, they have some Bible verses on the wall, but they have one right next to the machine, which is just so funny. And she said, and I go to sit down in the machine, and it says, it's 2 Corinthians 4:8, for we are hard-pressed on every side. And then it gets better. She said, the verse continues, for we are hard-pressed on every side, but we are not crushed. And I just said that right there. I mean, you got to laugh at that. That's a woman who's looking for funny all the time and humor. But we know as we stare at that, right, that verse doesn't mean that. That's taken, obviously, out of context. And some verses are fun to take out of context, and there's some irony and there's some humor to it. But sometimes when we take some verses out of context, it's not funny. It can actually be dangerous. And I want to tell you there is one verse out of Scripture that we're going to deal with today that has been ripped straight out of context. And it's really not funny. It has been quite dangerous. And it's this one. It goes, wives, you got to submit unto your husbands as unto the Lord. And that one's jacked right out of context, right? And so here's the deal. We're going to deal with this whole section today as we go through Ephesians chapter 5. But husbands, before you get too excited about that verse right there, as we're going to deal with it, just remember, the second half says, husbands, go and love your wives as Christ loved the church, watch, and gave himself up for her. Means that he literally went to the cross. So, wives, the next time you hear them say, submit to me, you just have my permission to turn around and just go, okay, well, go die. Because that's biblical too, right there, you know what I mean? I might have to submit, but evidently you got to go die. So, is everybody with me today? We're just trying to lift this topic just a little bit. And so I want to read. I want to start at the end of where we left off last week. Pick it up in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. We're going to go all through 33 or 30 something. I don't really remember, if I'm just being honest with you. There's a lot of verses here. So I know we're starting in verse 21, and then we're going to work through it. And our key verse is simply this. It's Ephesians 5:21 says, to both male and female, to both husband and wife, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, this is the verse that actually It oversees everything else we're about to read. Without that one, everything else you can get really lost in, and you can start taking stuff out of context, and you can apply it however you want, which has been done thousands of times, and it has never ended well. If you miss verse 21, everything else is going to be really, really tough for you to actually chew on and accept in today's world. But if you get verse 21 right, then everything else makes sense, because what he's going to do now in verses 22 through 33 is he's going to show us how we each have to work through mutual submission. And so he says, and he starts with wives, because Paul is a gentleman, and he says ladies first. So in verse 22, it reads this: Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And then he switches and goes to the men, and he says, Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. And he quotes, For this reason, a man will leave his mother and wife and be mother and father and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So we really don't appreciate what's happening here in the text, because Paul's idea on marriage and family is so specific, by the way, to people who lived 2,000 years ago across the world in a whole different continent. And he's talking to people who were Jews, who were very, very, very prideful men, and they would actually pray every day, and they would thank God that they weren't a woman, because this culture was so demoralizing for women, and women were second-rate citizens, and they, as men, had the power to walk away from their wife, and they could sign anything that they want by simply writing a bill of divorce, which might include a provision that she was free to marry whomever she wanted, maybe, if he wanted to do that. But the woman had no such right at all. And so what he's saying is something very profound for both people, and he's trying to communicate something that is timeless. And I'll get into that in just a second. But here is our love handle number 4. Love handle number 4 as we wrap up this series is this: It takes mutual submission to create a healthy relationship. It takes mutual submission to create a healthy relationship, and that involves roles. In life, everybody has a role, and every team has a role, and every band has a role, and every organization, there are roles. And Paul knows that inside of marriage, there are roles. Now, the issue is that we can think about this in all the wrong ways. And so, what we have to do is think of, what is he actually saying? For example, in your marriage, who does the finances? Raise your hand. Who's got that role? Who does the finances? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay. For those that are married, who does the cooking? Who's like, I like to cook. That's my job right there. I got that role. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. All right. If you have kids, who's the disciplinarian? Who's the one who had been the disciplinarian? Okay, the other person's a softie, right? All right, who's the planner? Who's the planner? Like, if we didn't plan, we wouldn't have anything, right? We wouldn't get anything done. Who raised their hand for all of those things right there? Some of us might have a little work to do. I'm just saying. Just saying. Oh. And in that, we see that there are roles. There are different things that we all do, but it's deeper than that. And so here's just a simple point for you as we're talking about how we mutually submit to one another, is simply this, that marriage works when you play your role. Now, all of those are cute, and all those are fun, and yes, you'll have to divide responsibilities to get life done and all that stuff, but that's really not what I or Paul am talking about at all. That's not what we're talking about. Those things have to happen, but there's something between the married couple that there are two unique individuals that God created so different and so separate and so unique in so many different ways that together you actually complete one another. And so you have two separate roles. Now here's the deal. Oftentimes in our world, we've moved from a patriarchal system. You know, Father Knows Best was a TV series somewhere back. Anybody watch that? Okay, Father Knows Best, and it was like a patriarchal. Well, then we saw a blended family approach with the Brady Bunch and all that, you know, and then everything moved to matriarchal in our culture, and then it's moved to kind of kid-centered in a lot of ways in today's world. And so we've kind of shifted where things roll and how the families are created and who has what roles. But one of the phrases you've often heard is that the man is to work and that the woman is to take care of the house. And that's kind of been this thing that has kind of mingled its way through the West and our American culture. But the problem with that is that's a relatively new thought. If you go back to the pre-industrial era, and you go back to, let's say, your great-great-grandparents, before there was high-end machinery and all this, and everybody was in the agricultural industry, meaning they had pretty big plots of land, they were all on farms, they had animals, and they were literally working. It actually was that both man and woman, both husband and wife, they did all of these things together. They worked the fields together because they had to, and the children followed right along. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go to the Amish country, and you'll see a modern-day representation of the pre-industrial age of what it looked like. They cleaned the house together. They did chores together. They did child rearing together. And so it can't be that, like, guys, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, if that was their roles, that the man does work and the woman cleans this, right? Then that wouldn't be timeless. And that's only in America that works. Think about it. The globe is what the Bible is actually preaching to. It's every culture, every time, every single race, every single person. And so what is being said has to transcend every single person. And by the way, it does, which is the beauty of it. And so there has to be deeper and bigger roles at play here. Here's what you need to know is that God created roles. He created roles for both man and woman to play, and that's taken right out of the heart of Genesis. And when we see God create, he creates Adam first in Genesis chapter 2. Now, when he creates Adam, he looks at Adam, and he says, let's make man in our image. And when he does that, because he's first and because he's the one that comes to life first, he says something that's really interesting. In all the days of creation in the prior week, he looked at everything he created, and God said, for it is good. Or he said, for it is very good. Until he made man. And when he made man, he stopped, and you can literally read verbatim. He said, for it is not good for man to be alone. And so he noticed something. That husbands, by yourself, left to your own devices since the beginning of time, God said, it is not good. You are what? You're incomplete. And so he said, so I must make a suitable helper out of the overflow of who I am that can be your perfect mate so that together you are now one in completion. Meaning that we have lacking and we don't have it all together, and we actually need something. And what God did is when he created woman, he gave her certain attributes, qualities, and characteristics that men don't naturally have. That's just plain and simple. You know what I love? I love when science catches up to the Bible. And science is like, we discovered something. I'm like, no, you didn't. God said it a long time ago and gave it to the church. There was this lady somewhere in like the late 80s, 90s or so, and she wrote a book, and I just want to show you what she found. And she was like in the early rise of feminism, which was fine. She was trying to figure out if every person, man and woman, serve the same role in the workplace, in the house, and what happens? Like, is there really something different? Like, what does this mean? And so she wanted to discover if there truly was two separate things at play here between man and woman. And her name, I'm going to read you a quote, was Carol Gilligan. I fused her name together. Author of In a Different Voice. And she said this after she got her findings. She says, men see themselves maturing as they separate and have impact. Women see themselves maturing as they attach themselves to others and become interdependent. Men therefore have the gift of independence, and women have the gift of interdependence. And what she discovered was that what the Bible has said all along was that no one's right or wrong, we're just different. Now, what she also discovered is that oftentimes women are much better at every role than men are. That's just a quick aside. I can't honestly and with integrity give you this and not give you that. So she did discover that women have something that men don't, but God already knew that in the first place, which is why he created women. Now here I have to tell you what the role is for men, and then I'm going to work through that because the language can get iffy, and that's why I said if we don't do this right, everybody gets all squirrely about this. So the role of the husband is to be the head and to submit to his wife through sacrificial love. That's scripture, that's Bible. He says, for he is the head, and wives, submit to husbands as he is the head. Now, what is he saying? Well, the head is the first part of the body. Well, what was created first? The man. Right? So he's simply just using analogy here to say, that's what this means. That he is the head, and therefore he has to initiate. He is the initiator. And he has to come back to an initiation. And here's what we have to do, men, is we have to love our wives through sacrificial love. That's Bible. And give yourself up for her as Christ did the church. Give yourself up for her, making her holy. Holy just simply means that which was incomplete is now whole. Okay? Now, sacrificial love, what does that mean? And what is this talking about? That we as husbands, we have to work through what does your wife actually need from you that would cause you to have some sacrifice involved. Let me just give you an example to show this. My wife and I, for years, and by the way, this whole series has been a lot of things if I just screwed up and I'm just telling you in front of everybody and what I'm trying to do to correct it, because I just believe in vulnerable communication, because I'm not saying I have this all together. Let me be very clear. So, there have been years that have gone by since Amanda and I have gotten married, and she would do certain plans, okay? Certain eating plans or dieting plans. And I would always be like, yeah, I'm for that. That's great. You know, that's awesome. Let's do that. And it was one of let's do that as in like you do that and I'll do me. You know what I mean? And as it rolled through, I started to hide behind the idea of sacrifice. Well, but I'm paying for it, you know, and I know it's tough, but we're going to buy two separate grocery bills because I have the things that I want to eat, and I'm not on plan with you, and so you got to buy the things that you want to eat. And I mean, we're sacrificing, right? I mean, we're paying for it and all this, and so like, yeah, I'm here for you. You do it and you go for it. But listen, sacrifice is only sacrifice if it feels personal to you. And I was really just comping one budget for another budget and calling it sacrifice. Because we weren't buying groceries over here, but now we're buying groceries over here. Makes sense? You tracking with me on this? And so, oftentimes as men, we can hide behind the idea that sounds good as I'm sacrificing until we actually have skin in the game. And so I decided here over just the last few weeks, we had this same conversation. We're slow. I just want to tell you, we're slow. It takes us a minute, but we'll get there. And I heard her say the same thing she said multiple times in a row. And I felt like the Holy Spirit said, well, why don't you just do the plan with her? Because that would be real sacrifice. Then you would have to change what you ate so that her needs could be met and she would be successful and she would be getting what she needed, but she can't do it unless you come on board. You're making her life harder, not easier. You're not lifting her up. You're not sacrificing for her. You're like, oh, I'm sacrificing money. No, you're not. You're just comping one thing for the next. Hiding behind the guise of sacrifice when you tell the story to make yourself feel better about yourself. So I said, okay, we'll go one grocery budget. I'm all in on this thing. And then I got real hungry as we started this whole idea, right? Reminding myself that this is a way that we sacrifice for her. And this gets deeper because sometimes we'll sacrifice with ulterior motives. Like, if I do this, then I'll get that. Oh, buddy, this one right here is a tough one. And that's not Jesus' style. Because it costs you something no matter what you get in return. And when Christ goes to the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he is going to go to the cross, he hits his knees and he knows it's going to cost him his whole life. And he says, Father, if there's any way that we don't have to do this, I will accept that. If there's any way we can get around this because the sacrifice is personal, it's going to cost me something, it's going to hurt, but I will prioritize the church's need above my life so that they can be successful, so that they can be whole, so that they can be complete. Are you following where this analogy is headed? And Jesus doesn't go, I'll give them one hand to nail to the cross so that I can survive the crucifixion and make it to my 40s, 50s, and 60s still with one hand and 2 feet. That's some sacrifice. No, he says, I'm going all in with the sacrifice, with no ulterior motive, just so that they can be whole. That is sacrificial love. And we are called, as it says in the text, to look at at those in our lives who are our wives, and we are supposed to sacrifice so that they can succeed. Because they need love. They need us to be the bearers of the relationship, who initiate, who go first, because we were created first. And anytime you get role confusion, it is not a good day. And names are ascribed to what people feel like and look like when we get people out of role, because a woman is doing a job that she was not meant to do and serving in a role she's not meant to serve in. And a man is serving in a role he's not meant to serve in. And so the wife takes on man responsibility and man leadership and man this, that, and the other. And the husband begins to do the opposite, taking on wifely things and all this, and it feels funny. And so I'm saying that we have to do our part as men. And we have to submit to our wives through sacrificial love. Now then, for the women, the role of the wife is to be the helper and to submit to her husband through respect and affirmation. Now, before I lose everybody in the room on the word helper, just follow me. God looked at man and said, for it is not good for him to be alone. He is incomplete. He doesn't have it all together. He is not sufficient by himself. In fact, he has certain things that he's going to need, superior qualities to get through life. And so out of him, so God takes out of Adam and makes Eve a suitable helper. A suitable helper, a suitable helper, a suitable helper to him. Now, when we use the word help, this can get really confusing depending on the analogy you use, and it can make you feel very belittled. So if you think of the analogy of helping somebody as if a child was helping you, then all of a sudden this becomes very patronizing. You know, like I'm not talking about like if Emma comes up to me and needs help and I'm like, okay, let me just show you what to do. You can't do it very well. You're not doing very good. Then you're like, okay, so I'm just supposed to be the child in the relationship, Alan. That's what you're telling me to do. I'm the one who just, okay, let me help you put the thing together. Let me help you as you load the dishwasher. Okay, thanks so much. I can do it better than you, and I'm a helper. Not at all, because that would make you so inferior, and that's not what this is saying. It's more like you are the helper who's the parent when a teenager comes to you and needs help on math homework. And they're going, I'm trying to figure it out. I don't really know about subtraction and addition and multiplication and division and all the other things. Can you help me? And the only way they would have to go to you is if you naturally knew more and you had certain abilities and you knew math and you'd already gone through the course and you had all these things that they don't have. That's what Paul's saying. He says, that's the kind of help you bring. So, if that is true in this type of helping way, then it happens through affirmation and respect. Affirmation and respect. Because you are gifted in ways that your husband is not. And because you're gifted in ways that your husband is not, you're able to see things that he can't see. Amanda helps me with this stuff all the time. Because honestly, I can be a little relationally unaware. Okay? And by the way, we already read this. That a social psychologist, a researcher, we read a quote that women have the gift and the skill set of interdependence from a social setting. So Amanda and I will go out to dinner, and we'll be with somebody. Or she'll sit in on a meeting or something, and we'll get in the car, and she'll go, hey, I just wanted to talk to you about some things that I noticed, in what we just did. Like you moved on so fast, and they were so confused at what you just said, and you just kind of left them hanging on a cliff, and they have no idea what they're supposed to do, okay? And I picked up on it, and I wanted to let you know. Or she'll tell me, hey, you were talking, over them, or you were talking too much, because I can do that. And I'm just social. I'm like, I didn't even know. I had no idea. I was just getting it done. I was just making it happen. Why? Because women have the gift and the ability to discern things and see things, and you're in tune with people and you sense things. I call it the sixth sense. It's scary because there's nothing that gets past you. And that's a gift that we have to have. That's a gift. And that in that way, it helps. Now, the way that you approach this, okay, if you get in the car and you're like, you idiot, why'd you say that? That was the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. Well, I'm just letting you know he didn't see it in the first place, so he's going to feel attacked. He's going to be like, I didn't know, because you are the helper. You're the gift when he can't see what God gave you the ability to see, because God made you like God, like he made man like God. You're just a second half that man doesn't naturally have. And so if you come at it in a belittling way, if you come at it with the wrong approach, if you come at it with like, okay, let me just help you out because you can't seem to get it right, then that's de-affirmation and that's disrespect. And we are called, as we look at it, to submit to him. By the way, submit is simply support, selflessness, and it's to come under the mission of the other person's needs. And if Scripture is telling us, here's the needs that we have, that women, they need love, and they need sacrificial love and support, and that men need respect and affirmation, then we have to meet that need and support that in the right way. Am I making sense? And so it's not oftentimes what you say, it's how you say it. And the tone and the attitude and all of that communication is where this thing gets all jacked up. Okay? Now here's what I would say. I want you to lift him up, don't push him aside. Lift him up, don't push him aside. If you ask a man, what does he want? Does he want love or respect? I'm saying 9 times out of 10, a man will just gravitate to that word and he'll say, I want to be respected. Now men, if you want to be respected, you first have to be respectable. So you got to start with yourself. You got to be respectable. And we'll say it all the time, you got to earn my respect. Okay. Well, let's start with our wife. Let's get that one right first. All right? But for women, you can make this real simple. I love it when we're cooking in the kitchen and Amanda will say, hey, Alan, there's this jar of pickles and I can't open them. You can't open them. Alan, if you don't open this jar of pickles, we won't eat tonight. Could you open this jar of pickles so that we can have pickles on our hamburgers? And I take the pickle jar and I walk around that pickle jar. And with all the masculinity that these muscles have, I twist that lid as hard as possible. You know the sound that happens when you've executed. Oh, you know. And I just stare at her and I hear that sound and I go, tonight we eat. Are there any other jars you need opened? I'll open every jar in the house. Unfortunately, wives, men deal with a lot of insecurity. It's kind of pathetic because we do feel so emboldened with such small little things, and all you got to do is affirm it. All you got to do is respect it. All you got to do is say, oh, thank you so much. I mean, wow. The whole family is now provided for. And on and on and on it goes. And so as we each come to each other, giving the other person what they need, then we come into a healthy mutual relationship because there are certain things that you have a role to play in and certain things that you have a role to play in that both parties need from one another. And so it takes mutual submission. And Paul is saying it's not just one party submitting to the next, it's mutual submission out of reverence for Christ. And anytime that you pray, God, what do I need to do? How can I help? What goes next? In our marriage, God's always going to speak to you about what you can do to help the other person because it's the Jesus style of love, of respect, of sacrifice, of affirmation. And that's all Bible. Now, the issue that really we all have with this is that sin has corrupted the roles. Sin came in after God made man and woman. In Genesis 3, there's a curse that comes based on the one thing that we were not supposed to do, which was eat the fruit. And when the fruit was eaten, the fall of man comes. They realized that they were naked and they were afraid, and sin has corrupted the roles. Well, how do I know that? Because Genesis 3:16 through 19 tells us that he looks on it and he says, for the men will have a predisposition to work and toil and labor in the fields. What is that? That's the independence that this researcher found that God already said that's part of the consequences for your decision, that you will work and that you will toil and that you will labor in the fields and you will think about it and you will talk about what we have oftentimes your calling, and you will be enamored with it, and you will have to work with the sweat of your brow dripping down your face, which will naturally remove you from the family. It will remove you from the marriage. It will be an entertaining thing that you will have to manage. But then on the other side of it, that wives, you will have to deal with the fact that this is coming through in child rearing and labor and in pain, and the interdependences can be connected, and you, because now he's going to be focused on his part and sin corrupted, that you might serve in a role you were never meant to serve in, and now we're going to have to deal with the management of role reversal. And sometimes I say it this way, that he cares about the calling and she cares about the family, so the marriage is falling. And here's what can happen, is that when we take these verses and we get too far on one side or the other, husbands can become tyrants. And I want to be very clear today. I want to be very clear today. It is not my position. It is not the Bible's position. It is not the church's position that any woman should remain in an abusive relationship and take this message out of context and and think she is just supposed to remain and stay. Listen, if you are in emotional, physical, or spiritual abuse, we are not okay with that. You need to get safe. We need to get your family safe. And I need you to talk to somebody from our church because we have people that we can connect you with. So please hear me very clearly what I am not saying. Because husbands, when we get this wrong, can become tyrants. And we can boss, and we can belittle, and we can lead, and we can damage, and we can crush the spirit of a woman that we were always meant to uplift and to hold. And we have to now move away from that independent thing and think of her and prioritize her above ourselves and starve the flesh so that we could sacrifice for the wife, for the perfect gift that God gave us. And when we get this wrong, you've seen this before, that wives can become dependent. And they can become very reserved, and they can become, well, whatever you need and whatever you say. I won't make any decisions. I won't do anything. I know I'll ask for permission. I don't want to upset. I don't want to do anything. So you just tell me what to do, and I'll fall in line, and I'm just dependent on everything that you need and say and do, and we can get this out of balance. And that was never intended to be that way. That sin corrupted the roles. That sin had a way of coming in where we now have to consciously and prayerfully prioritize and consider the other person that God gave us and to serve them. To serve them. And sometimes it's hard because everybody's going to wonder when they leave the entire marriage series, as you've probably wondered every week, and you're going to wonder the same thing today. Well, what am I supposed to do? If my needs aren't getting met, how do I give their needs? I mean, I got needs of my own. I got things I need. I got stuff that I got to get done. And we have all this, what about me? What about me? What about me? And all I can do is prop up Bible to you, and I can tell you that it is our job to serve your spouse. Let me show you the wheel here. This is a wheel that we have that comes through that says, blank your spouse, blank your spouse. The first one is this. When you serve your spouse, it causes something to happen on the backside. The more that you serve, the more that you initiate, the more that you go first, the more that you meet their needs, the more that you say, I am going to submit. I'm coming under the mission of your needs. Nothing bossy, nothing out of context, nothing strange here. I'm coming under the mission of the God-designed needs that He biologically placed and hardwired in your spouse. I'm going to serve that. Here's the coolest thing in the world. The more that you serve your spouse, it has an adverse effect where you love your spouse. And the more that you serve your spouse, you'll have the feelings of love. You know what's so fun? The more that you love your spouse, it'll feed right back into that serving thing. And the more you'll want to serve your spouse. And the more you serve your spouse, the more you'll love your spouse. The more you love your spouse, the more you'll serve your spouse. And the more you serve your spouse, the more you'll love your spouse. And on and on and on it goes. Now imagine for a moment if both people were committed to out-serving the other. Boy, y'all be happy, wouldn't you? Because you'd be like, you first. No, 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 you first. And I'd love to see that break out all over Vivid Church, just a you first war. Because it would be competition, but it's not competition, it would be completion. And when you do that, final thing, and then I'll get out of your way, that when you make the decision to serve and you choose to love, the feelings will follow. The feelings will ultimately follow. The feeling of love, it always follows the decision to love. Love handle number 4. It takes mutual submission to create a healthy relationship. Would you stand with me today and let me pray for you?